A big hello, salam, ողջույն to everyone. Thank you for coming to our second roundtable, where we have a very special guest, Javid Agha. Anyone involved in the South Caucasus circles, of course, knows him. He's involved with journalism, civil society. He writes on different topics, and overall a very interesting personality. And I'm very excited for this roundtable. So, Javid, you want to introduce yourself with a few words?
Well, thanks for inviting me. First of all, I'm very bad at this, to be honest. I'm very bad at public speaking, but I'll try to say a few words. Nowadays I'm a journalist, but I've started out as a blogger. So I'm having trouble with defining myself on one line of work. So it's as a politically correct way of calling myself lurker. I just use the social media observer. So yeah, shoot your questions.
All right, wonderful. So since we have Eliza here, let's start with her question. Eliza, can you unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Thanks, guys. Thanks for organizing the second roundtable, and I'm excited for more. The first roundtable was really inspiring. Yeah, Javid, I would like to know from you, what is the role? I have a question right here, so I'm just going to read it out. What is the role and level of participation in the peace-building discourse between Azerbaijan and Armenia? That comes actually from Azerbaijan's minorities like Talish, Avars, Lezgins, Udi, etc. I would like to know, are there any initiatives organized on a civil level that contribute to dialogue that are either in Azerbaijan or abroad? Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks. Well, for starters, the peace building, I usually divide this peace building activism history to before the Second War and after the Second War. Before the Second War, it was mostly some oppositioners who have tried to organize these meetings, mostly in Georgia. I'm sure most of you have heard about the Kali process, and some of them used to meet annually. But these movements, these events usually lacked the character of confrontation. What I mean with confrontation is the confrontation with the real feelings and the facts. Everyone tried to find some mutual grounds, let's say common food, common culture, common music, but they always refrained from talking about hard truths like maybe refugees or the war crimes or the bloody history. They tried to avoid this. Therefore, it was fruitless at the end. They just shared some meals, listened to music, drink some wine, maybe in Georgia. But we have seen that during the war, all that peace building activism was for nothing. Most of those people changed and went back to the old ways. So, for example, events like this, like projects like this, like Bright Garden, which has started after the Second War, has completely different characteristics. There is also an effect of social media here. For example, we didn't have a Zoom back then, so we didn't have these kinds of meetings like all over the world. I'm in Azerbaijan, you guys in US or Brazil, I don't know. So, but then we only had Georgia, and that was it. Therefore, scope was also limited. And when it comes to minorities, Usually in Azerbaijan, people rarely say their ethnic identity out loud. So even me, with my coworkers, I've only recently learned one of them is Budukh, one of them is, no, two of them is Talish, and some of them have like Ukrainian mothers. Such identity-related details are considered private information, and nobody even thinks of asking like, what is Talish? How do you speak, or like what's your some cultural novelties that we don't know? People usually don't ask these questions unless someone explicitly says. So I still find out that some of my like ancestors, like I just like few weeks ago, I found out that one of my great-grandparents were Talish, and I asked like why nobody talked about it before. I said that, yeah, it's not important. Like this, some random guy died long ago. So in comparison to modern times, back then people just mingled, married. So therefore there are differences. Like in these peacebuilding meetings before the war, nobody knew each other's ethnic identity. Everyone was Azerbaijani. But after introduction of these decolonialism narratives, or like identity narratives, identity politics narratives, now people are more identify themselves as Talish, Tat, Lezgi, or others. So when it comes to peace buildings, this aspect slowly starts to play a major role, but it is very slow, because in 90s it was an ethnic war. Udis were, for example, Udis were part of greater Armenian nation in our eyes, so they were barred from joining the army. Only after a few years, these liberalizations came. So there was like a Talish TV, I think, operating in Karabakh, while maybe in Armenia, I forgot about it, but it was one of this separatist fear of separatism was also played a role in this. So it is it was much more complex. Now it seems much more easier, because people are more knowledgeable about identity politics, or they feel much more freer about talking about their own language or culture. So that's the current situation. I myself, before the war, wasn't very active in peace building, because I lived in Turkey. I was a student, just learning things. It all started after the Second War, or more precisely 2016 crashes. I've started to talk to and interact with more Armenian people to get to know them. Before that, it was very limited for me. Yeah, I hope it answers your question.
Makes sense. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Eliza, for the question. David, do you want to first start with your question about the current situation, and now about the rhetoric about cultural heritage, Caucasian, Armenian churches, etc.?
Yeah. Yes, so thank you very much for having this opportunity. And I am a journalist specialized in national minorities. I'm writing specifically about it. I was in Zinoviani last year with Alexander Kaftarage, and I have a question regarding the fact that nowadays Baku took over or recovered the whole Nagorno-Karabakh. What is the rhetoric in terms of all the Armenian temples that are in this area? Is still this instrumentalization of saying that all of them are Caucasian Albanian, or this has stopped because there is no need to go forward with this narrative? And what does the general audience in Azerbaijan think about turning these Armenian temples into Caucasian Albanian? Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I don't think that it's going to ever stop unless there is a political will to stop calling Armenian temples Albanian. And it has been, because its seeds was sown during the Soviet era, and it has somewhat shaped the historiography of Azerbaijan. And so, like, before the Soviets, nobody claimed these temples or like churches as Albanian because they simply did not have the knowledge of them. It did exist. It was only it was only in the name for Armenians, but Udis regarded themselves as descendants of Albanians. So these were the only knowledge of Albanian existence. So Azerbaijanis didn't really care that much, so they didn't. So it came after the Soviet nation building efforts, because there had to be some protest states. Georgians had theirs, Armenians had theirs, and Soviets was like anti-colonial. They had this anti-colonial politics, so they had to invent story for every nation. Some preceding, so like they found some for Tajiks, some for Uzbeks, and for us it was Albania. And for the South Azerbaijan, so-called Azerbaijan in Iran, it was found to be Atropatena. So, but it's a like long story. But long story short, it is currently it still continues to be told, and in order to call them Armenian churches, they put that threshold that after the Russian invasion, if that church was built after the Russian invasion, it is either Russian Orthodox or Armenian church. Rarely Georgian, but these are not in Karabakh on the north part. So these are the narratives. I think that it's going to be continued, and what we can possibly see is erasure of these Armenian inscriptions from the churches, but they will let the church just go ruined. Like, I don't think that they are going to be destroyed like cemeteries. Cemeteries could be destroyed, but not the churches. At least they will leave them for tourists, for storytelling purposes. So this happened to other non-Karabakh Armenian churches in Azerbaijan too. For example, Shabran Tats churches, Armeno-Tat churches, Shamakh, Baku Armenian church in Baku itself. There is no inscription or anything. So most likely these inscriptions will be removed, scrapped off. And I don't think that they are going to inscribe Albanian letters because they don't know about it. They don't know how to write. So I don't think that's going to happen. But most in danger these days are cemeteries. As for what people think about this conversion, they don't really care. They didn't care when they were Armenian. They won't care when it is called Albanian, because most of these people grew up with Armenians, so they still call these churches Armenian churches. If you go to a random village, they'll call them Armenians. They will even call Udis Armenians. When I was in Oğuz, formerly Vartashen, in 2015, no, 13, sorry. I saw a big yard with cross signs on it, and I asked some locals just next to the river who are like uncles making kebab, right? Like, what is this place? Is this some Christian's yard, villa or something? They said that, no, that's an Armenian cemetery. They are destroying ours in Karabakh, but we are keeping their cemetery secure because they were our neighbors. So this intrigued me. I went to the cemetery, took a couple of photos, I looked up the graves names. None of them were Armenian. They were all Udi names, and people who came to the chapel were also Udis. So these guys don't know who their neighbors are. They don't even know that Udis exist. It's only for the history enthusiasts like me, like very selective people, and the media. So that's why Udis are still afraid of being called Armenians. They try to wash it down, this history, and they even like use some more European sounding names rather than Armenians. For example, the caretaker of the church was Rand, like ranting. His name was Rand, and his friends was called like Onik, some other Armenian names, Sevan. But new generation is most like Scandinavian names, like Edward, Eric, or like some European sounding names. One of them was even called Ronaldo. So these naming conventions changing, and they are trying to forget this Armenian past, so to speak. Yeah, you can find more about this in my website. I made this field research in niche with my French friend. So it's in Azerbaijani, I think, but you can easily translate it with Google Translate. You can see more details of my trip there. So yeah, but that's the current condition of this.
Thank
Thank
you,
you very
Javid.
much.
And David, actually, you had a separate question just about Zinobiani and Nij and, the center of Udi culture. By the way, I met Alexander a few months ago in person. Very interesting person. Do you want to ask Javid more specifically on?
Yes. My question would be regarding, as you said, Zinoviani as becoming the center of the Udi culture. What does the people in August, in former Vartashen and in Nij, think about Zinobiani nowadays? Do they know about it? Are they engaged, or they have no idea of what's happening over there?
Well, they read most of the Udis in August or like Nij. They're mostly on Russian-speaking social media, and their kids also Russian speakers. Mostly their relatives are in Russia. So especially after the pandemics, like closure of the borders, there is no like physical interaction between Zinobiani and Azerbaijan, the community in Azerbaijan. This goes for Russia too, and in Zinobiani too, they are, I'm sure that Alexander told you that they are in danger of becoming Georgianized, like since they don't see any cultural difference between themselves. Like in Azerbaijan, it is much more easy to keep your identity because everyone else is Muslim and Turk. So it's easier to keep your identity. But in Georgia, when everyone is Christian, you can intermarry freely. You are at risk of losing your identity. So in Azerbaijan, they are mostly connected to Russia because they are much more richer relatives or people who went to find some jobs. They are much more connected to Russia, maybe Sverdlovsk or like Rostov. I don't know where the Udis live in Russia, but yeah, they have a small connection. Back then, Alexander told me that there were some trips of school children to see each other's villages, but it was long ago. It doesn't happen anymore, and I don't think it's happening until the land borders are open again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Is Zaur still here?
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Please go ahead. Your question.
Yeah, so actually, I think Javid already answered the question a bit, but I'm still gonna, ask him the question around the crosses, because we see that there are a lot of posts and on the Facebook, the Udi community actually use their what they called Caucasian Albanian cross, with the tulips or whatever it is, at the end, and also we have Armenian cross, and then you also shared something on Twitter about there was a great Catholicos of Albania and Balasakan cross, something like that. So can you just elaborate on that? Like, are they just a variation of the same cross, or it's more like it's just a different patriarchy and they have completely different crosses from each other? Can you just elaborate on that?
Oh, okay. Well, current Udi community, as an NGO, they took their symbolism from the gravestone of Avetik Jotatians, the founder of the Jotari Church in Niš, which was built in 19th century. So they just chose their iconography logo from on the some motifs, illustrative motifs on the gravestone, and that writings on the gravestone is in Armenian, and this church, Jotari Church, is named after Jotatians, and it is actually remnant of the Albanian language that Chatar means church. Sorry, it's not Chatar, it's Tachar. There has been a linguistic shift, and so they took their symbolism from this 19th century gravestone. So it is not in gold. And so there is no basis to claim that that was an Albanian cross. They just took this symbolism. And if you go to see their website, udis.us, their logo with the two angels, it's also from the same gravestone. And so, yeah, they even made this, their clothes, like priestly clothes for, it has no basis either, because they don't actually have a functioning church as in institution, like Armenian church, Russian church, Georgian church. They are just an NGO. As for the cross that I've published, it is from Dagestani researcher Murtuzali Hajiyev's work. He found this from actually a seal, a gem seal, currently kept in France. It is partly corrupted, but Albania, Ardan, and Balasakan is clearly readable. So we don't know if it is Pant or something else, but we know that it is seal of a Catholicos. So therefore, I chose this much more historical one as the logo. And yeah, it's good, but it's like all theories right now. We don't know if they had their own coat of arms or cross stylism or anything, because they were small minority even during that era, because they could not solidify all those tribes yet, thanks to Arabs. So they did not have time to make these distinctive styles in their architecture, or making their own khachkars maybe. So yeah, according to the data we have, we cannot claim that.
Yeah, Zara, and I mean, typical Armenian crosses, they evolved. I mean, they share so much with other crosses from the region, other Christian traditions, and, symbols are sometimes just very by accident and not even representative of something at some point. Good question. Let's see. Not here. So let's go to Rolf. Why don't you ask your question now?
Perfect. Hi, Javid, and welcome, and thank you for being here today. We discussed this question with Arnold yesterday when we were having the internal meeting, and I think we've formulated it this way. You've written about Safavids and how Shah Abbas has reached out to Europe through their spy network or representation or embassy. And while I was reading this beautiful article, by the way, which I would recommend everyone to read, I thought, I kind of in my mind, I made an analogy with the current Persia or Iran and Azerbaijan. And then the question kind of arose that came to my mind was, what I observed lately is that Azerbaijani political elite or those who are associated with the government are usually associate themselves with Safavids and take a pride that it's an Azerbaijani dynasty. So the first question would be, why do you think they do it? What's the motivation behind it? And then the second question is a little bit different. When you do your researches, have you ever stumbled upon any remark or any writing saying that or indicating that Safavids actually identified themselves as Azerbaijani? I mean, I know it's a very broad notion when you talk about Azerbaijan, but maybe they associate themselves with Turks, or maybe they didn't care, or maybe they associate themselves as Iranians or Persians. So yeah, two questions.
Thanks so much. Let me start with the first one. Well, I'm currently, it is a continuing series of articles. I chose to write it because usually historiography glorified kings and generals, but I tried to learn more about diplomats and translators and spies who actually facilitated the events. So when it comes to current politics, I don't think that it's Aliyev's or like Azerbaijani governments are claiming direct connection to Safavids. I've read such op-eds by the Ramiz Mehdiyev way back in the day, but it was not something like scientific. It was like just a regular trash Azerbaijani propaganda article that is written for the politicians. So I wouldn't read much into it, but when it comes to official historiography, even starting from the Abbas Ağa Bachkanov's time, Safavids are considered as the start of the modern Iranian and Azerbaijani nations, because they have set these institutions that are still intact. For example, the Shia Islam, which has been transformed from the original Shah Ismail's Kızılbaş Islam, more likely, which was much more heterodox and much more closer to Alevi in some regard. So the guy Shaykhul Islam Majlisi, who made this more codified, like Shia Islam, it has been during Safavid times. Some of these institutions that some palaces or like some cultural landmarks in Iran mostly has been built during the Safavids, then added during the Qajars and Arda dynasties. So because we don't have much left from, let's say, Mongol era or Seljuk era because of the earthquakes or constant wars, so Safavids are also seen as someone who brought stability. So maybe this was some sort of analogy being done by the government apologists, like stability is the same like Safavid times, so we need to support government. Maybe that's one. But I don't believe that as a actual ground. When it comes to historiography, they always nitpick. Sometimes they are more Turkic, sometimes they are Albanian, sometimes they don't even think about like medieval era. They start to talk about democratic republic. So history is a tool for them. And for the second question, well, actually I forgot the second question. Can you repeat? Sorry. You are mute.
I've been talking for an hour. Sorry. The second question was, did Safavid themselves, like the dynasty, did they identify themselves as anything?
Okay, thank you. So, well, they had these two different definitions. One were in the Europe, how they view, and one were inside. And it's because of the Don Juan of Persia's work, as it's titled in the West. They called themselves Kızılbaş, and they knew that there are many tribes. They had this tribal identity, but they were united around the identity of being Kızılbaş, being led by God-appointed Shah over them. But for the outside, they were seen as Persians. And they did not see this difference between, Europeans did not see this difference between these tribes as they would have seen. And from Don Juan of Persia's work, we see that he calls, in order to make it much more understandable for Europeans, he just calls Ottomans Turks and themselves Persians, but he knows the tribal identity. And when I've been researching Shah Abbas diplomatic activities in West, it's seen that Europeans, like the European courts, when they are talking to ambassadors, they call their Turkish-speaking translators to have a conversation with them, not Persian. But when they themselves translate, these translators translate what they have been talking about, they always call them Persian and Ottomans Turk, the great enemy, great Turk. So Ottomans already was like took that trademark for themselves. So I think that Safavids were already aware of this. So even in Europe, they didn't use this. But we have these documents, like not letters that have been written by Russian Tsars, Yekaterina, for example. They have been writing to Safavid Shahs, in some cases even Georgian kings in Azerbaijani variation of back then Turkish. And it's being called Turki Acemi. But I don't think that they had this ethnic identity back then. They just, they were on the way of identifying themselves after this religious identity that is being Kızılbaş.
Thank you, Rolf, for the question and very interesting answer. Safavids are very interesting, actually. They're part of the discourse lately a lot more. So we have a question. Let's follow on this trend. We have a question from Uli also on identity. So she's asking, Javid, you're not a fan of the concept of nationalism, but this question is about identity, and it could be your identity or being from Kurdakhani or of being of Padar descent. But if you were to name five top bullet points of what constituted your Azerbaijani identity, what would that be? We recently shared this question within our Armenian Azerbaijani group and heard interesting themes such as Samovarti, Mugham, Uzair, Hajibeyov, etc., etc. So 5 bullet points, Javid. If you were to choose 5 bullet points, what do you think comes to your mind for an Azerbaijani identity?
For Azerbaijani identity, first thing comes to my mind is this the cliche of being from land of fire. Every Azerbaijani tells this when they are outside of Azerbaijan. Despite that, it had some religious connotation back then, and I don't think that it was even connected to Azerbaijan. So first thing comes to my mind is this land of fire cliche. And second thing comes to my mind is the fact that last 3 of our 4 presidents were surnamed Aliyev. So that's the second thing, because I'm very politically minded. So whenever I think of Azerbaijan, Aliyev comes to my mind at the second point. Third point would be our variation of dolma, that I see it as being different from other styles like sarma, as they say in Turkish, and it is always with meat as opposed to other variations. So when it is not with meat, we call it yalancı dolma, that's fake dolma. So I think that the addiction to meat is one of the defining points of being Azerbaijani. In that sense, the fourth bullet point would be people have these mostly like maybe not elderly, but upper people on the way to be going elderly. They have this nostalgia for their long lost childhood villages. They have this nostalgia for hardened childhood, and they like to just shit on new generation, how easy their life is, but they are not trying so hard enough. Maybe it could be a much more wider phenomenon, but my dad always likes to speak about his life in nomadic tents, that we would go from mountain to mountain, and we would not have time to study and stuff, but you have all that money, but all you do is play games. Despite that, I'm actually making money just because of the computer. I don't play all the time, but they see computer equal to games. So that would be the major bullet point for me. But as I said, it might have wider understanding. Fifth identity would be fifth bullet point would be very harsh localism that still is in Azerbaijan. That is rudiment of Khanate times after the breakup of Safavid Empire, and people still just randomly hate other guy without even meeting, just because like he's from Karabakh maybe, or like maybe he's Yeraz, or maybe he is from Shamakh like me. And even when you go to micro level, in Baku villages, for example, I live in Kürdakhan. In Baku villages, we have nicknames, like weird nicknames for other villages. Like Pirshaghe is like Tambes Pirshaghe, or like for people from Zigh, we have other stereotypes. So when you even go deeper, even inside the village, my maternal clan, for example, Hacı Ağalı, they are called stubborn Hacı Ağalı. So it is like some sort of trait that all part of my family, we are like stubbornly fighting against everything. We are always contrarian. Maybe there is some truth to it, but we like to make these localistic stereotypes. So not only against like British, Armenian, Georgian, but more harshly even against each other. Maybe, for example, I've once overheard conversation between my mom and my uncle. Some of our one of our refugee neighbors died because of electroshock, and like I heard them talking to each other, like, "Are you going to the funeral?" My uncle said that no, they have never came to our funerals. Also, they are not from here, despite that we have been living together for like maybe 10 years. So they still have this, and my uncle would be even much more harsher towards, for example, Yeras, that I'm not going to quote him right now. So I think this is one of the defining traits of an Azerbaijani. Like, doesn't matter if you are from Fizuli, if you are from like Derbent, somewhere else, they will always find something.
All right, thank you. Thank you for answering Uli's question. She couldn't be there. My favorite Azerbaijani in LA. We have questions from Mane was here when we started. Did she leave? She probably had to go, right? Okay, so she asked, first of all, would you describe your political leanings as liberal or libertarian?
Oh, that's quite a harsh one, because I would describe myself as an individual anarchist, but thanks to the lack of my same-minded friends, there's not much people that share the same opinion, political opinion with me. I tend to align myself with libertarians because they are the closest to me. And the funny thing is here, libertarian community is so small, like maybe like 5 people. They tend to call themselves liberals. So it's like identity inside identity, political identity. So I try to identify myself mostly as individualist anarchist. And if you want to more generalize, I would call myself libertarian. Or more generalized, I would call myself liberal. Yeah, that's that's the answer.
She also has another question. Do you automatically consider people who are swayed by tribalism intellectually lesser, or do you think the arguments they bring are worth exploring?
Well, I automatically consider them intellectually lesser, because I've been through that way, and I've been not even like tribalist. I was racist back when I was a teenager. So I have this zeal of the convert, as you could have seen from the religions. I have this zeal of the convert against all kinds of identity extremism, that we all share one common identity, let's unite against it and make it our entire lifestyle. Yeah.
All right, and this ties to a question I have actually. So, Coca-Cola, dinosaurs, Armenian historiography, national identity, partly, there's also this competition, Azerbaijani historiography trying to sort of outdo Armenians in others. But my question is sort of, in this age of all these scientific studies and studies of ideas of ethnicity and national identity, genetics, etc., we have all these sort of scholars and, very educated people, it's the way they use these fantasies of race and ethnicity and tribe and nation. And it's very selective. For example, for Armenians, in Armenia specifically, it's, Urartu has a major role. They choose one dynasty over the other. And what does it mean, for example, to be Armenian? It meant totally different things in different periods. And what did in each period people consider themselves? Was it a local, religious? It's just a group of so many different tribes that formed these nations, Azerbaijani, Armenian. And we choose how we sort of remember these tribes, how we align ourselves to these tribes. Who are their descendants, these people that were once called this or that, are they even mostly Armenian or this? And it's just in discourse, even among, you know, intellectuals, it's this romantic, fantasies play still a very huge role. And it's not just for this region, but specifically for Armenians and Azerbaijanis. Do you see, where do you see this headed, you know, in the near future? And do you see sort of alternatives to the more traditional, to the more mainstream ideas of these nations and their sort of this, what do you call it, these competitive historiographies? Do we see anything more regional, more inclusive, or just different, global?
Well, I think that this whole hype around genetic test would be useful in that sense, because when you talk about identity, people try to ignore or even refuse the fact that that is much more in your culture and your upbringing. For example, we have Russian-speaking Azerbaijanis. They would call themselves Azerbaijani, but there is literally nothing connects us. They don't even speak my language. Only the fact that we live in the same city, but they have never moved beyond like 28 May station. But we still call ourselves Azerbaijani. He thinks that he's of the same identity with me, but I don't consider him such. And for example, I have a close friend, you can say, maybe you know him, and we are both from the Padar tribe, from the same area, and we both had this genetic test, and there's like family tests which explores your father and mother's relations with them. It's shows us as very close cousins, but the paternal line, the Y-DNA, it shows that we are completely from different haplogroups. So our paternal line is completely different, but these guys are supposed to be from the same tribe, same clan, the same paternal ancestor. But it seems like it's not like that. So did it change any view of ours towards our identity? No, we still, in family gatherings, they are still call each other like, well, we are the Padar from the same tribe. And we still have these same like intertribal jokes and stuff like that. And when I told my dad that, hey, you know, our ancestors might be converted Jews, because all these guys are Jews from Poland, and he at first, like, he stumbled, like he was like he wanted to say something, deny it, and say that, whatever, like what is in the past has been in the past. It's much more matters what I am now. So now, like, I feel that he's much more inclusive towards others, and these DNA tests will not change our identity culturally, but it might change our perception of others around us. And there are notable exceptions. For example, I knew a guy who was very Turkic nationalist, even founded his party like Turan Yas movement and stuff like that. And after a while, he discovered that he's taught, then immediately become an Aryan nationalist. Like, I am from the white race and stuff like that. Then after he dig much more, and he found out he's Jew. And now he's like a Zionist. He converts his political identity or like ethnic identity every year in a while. And like you can just keep it up. There are these kind of exceptions too, but I think they are minority. So when I told one of these examples, actually, I can give you from my field trip to Udi community in Niche. They took me to a church. Hrant took me to a church and started to talk about this history of this church. And he said that when Russians came and gave this church to Armenians, we didn't go there. We closed our doors and prayed inside. This church was built for Armenians. And I've read the inscription on the church, and there is a saying that there is a inscription says that this Aristocratian family founded this church. And when I told him that, he was like, "What, Aristocratian?" I said, "Yeah." "Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah." So it's my ancestors that has been built this church, but he didn't even know his own history. He thought that it's an Armenian built church, and I asked him, like, why do you think your house is just next to this church? So he didn't even think about it up until that point. So his perception of identity completely changed. Now he's much more protective of that church. Now he's much more open to other details that non-state actors' opinions about history and stuff. Yeah, I think that this kind of much more scientific approach can change our perception, so that it is all cultural, it is all subjective, maybe.
Yeah, and I mean, in the recent past, I mean, for example, it was men who really had a political identity, and therefore, for example, if a woman married a man, you know, she would enter that tribe. As you know, in many cultures, they take that last name, that man's last name. So I mean, it was very fluid. And for example, Armenians have this thing of calling someone who changes their religion, converts to Islam, for example, Turks, or you know, to become Muslim or to become Turk, even in places where there aren't Turks. So you know, this idea of ethnicity and religion, and of course it means different things. Different tribes mean different things in different times. Then there's the nation state identity, and so various layers. But yeah, genetics. And Javid, are to people in the region, in the South Caucasus, are we predominantly related to, for example, the prehistoric peoples of the region, the Iron Age? Like, roughly speaking, or it's more complicated?
Well, I'm not an expert on that, so I can't really answer this, sorry.
All right. And actually, just have one more question here. The Caucasian Albanians, right, in this context. And, you know, we know since Soviet times, there's this competing historiography, you know, and Caucasian Albanians have been sort of in the mix. So we have the Udis, and I'm not sure if there's any other communities from Caucasian Albanians today surviving as a viable community. And then they're also considered, you know, the past in Azerbaijan, right? And not so much in Armenian sort of mainstream discourse, even though a lot of Udis became Armenianized at that point. Or maybe they became Armenianized, then they became Muslim, then they entered the Azerbaijani. So there's different layers here. So how could these Caucasian Albanians, you know, how could they make us reimagine, you know, the Armenian and Azerbaijani identity? Because these are people that probably we both identities absorb, right? And they also survive as a different group. If you have any comments on that.
Well, according to the latest research, we mostly have language data, and based on the linguistic data, we can surely say that during this Christianization times, we can say that their Bible was translated from many sources, and Armenian Bible is one of those sources, because there are Armenian words like Vardapet and others, and there are Assyrian layers, There is like Georgian layer. Like even then, like back in sixth century, they were already having these long words in their languages. So this is an important point in time that we like to think about these antique, ancient nations as pure. They're having their own scripts and like having their own pure words, but it was not like that. Even in Old Turkic language back in Mongolia, even they have some Hindu words in their language. So there's like a Sanskrit words in their language. So this mix, this cultural intermingling, have much more ancient story. And when it comes to, it's also connected to the earlier question you had. For example, when case of Udis, the most of the travelers who are talking about, have been talking about right now about Udis back in 19th century, they describe themselves as Armenian Udis or Georgian Udis. To our modern ears, this sounds like mumbo jumbo, but for them, this Armenianness and Georgianness meant actually Orthodoxy or Gregorianism. So even these families of Udis had these rivalries between themselves, and the fact that we have Udi Bible right now and Udi alphabet right now is thanks to an Orthodox Udi Mikhail Bejanov, who hated Armenians so much that he tried to purge every Armenian word from the Bible and tried to either put the Russian version there or Udi or Georgian version there. And thanks to them, we have this. But when you see the rival family of Bejanovs, which are called Silikovs, for example, Armenian national hero Moses Silikyan is from this family, and Moses' cousin had this letter to his father that I am in the Russian army. I speak proudly of my Udi heritage, my Caucasian heritage, but my friends there asked me to sing them some Udi songs or like Udi poetry, and I couldn't quote any. And he asked his father to send him some books in Udi, and he says that, sorry, we don't have books in Udi, it's all Armenian. And by that point, they hardly spoke Udi at all. And this shows that having this religious identity adds another layer. And after this, for example, this DNA test we have in Shaki region, most of the Muslims, their DNA results is very close to Udis. And I link to this fact that in Shaki Khan's Khanate, they were fiercely Sunni, and their Khan even was probably an ethnic Udi or less likely Armenian, but he converted to Islam and had this zeal of convert, and he pushed this post-conversion to Udis as well. And once they became Muslim, their Christian king didn't consider them as Udis. They called them Turks or Muslims. He became Turk, just you said. Udis also considered them like that. And there is Rashid Bey Efendiyev from Kabbalah. When he made this field trip back in the much or less same time, he witnessed Muslims who are speaking Udi language or Udis who are speaking only Azerbaijani but call themselves Udi. So this conversion already was going, and probably there are now, I don't know, 100,000 of Azerbaijanis in that region that don't even know that their ancestors might be Udis, could be Udis or Armenians maybe. So they have this identity, Azerbaijani. We have no, I have no quarrel with them. So but it shows that layers and how time and identity change can change our perception too. And this historic, therefore we have to look everything more detailed layer of historical events. What caused them to be like this? Another example I'm going to give you in near Vakashen, Oğuz, there's a monastery called Jalut Monastery. During the Karabakh War in 90s or 80s, all of its population was Armenian. So they went to Armenia or Russia after the war, and there was no evidence that they were Udi. So, but they had their own Catholicosate, like rival Catholicosate to the one in Karabakh. For a century, same village, Soyudlu, Jalut, but they were from other villages like Soyudlu and etc. They had their own Albanian identity. So even Armenian researchers back in the time, like Makar Baruktarians and others, they even baffled in front of this fact that they have this Catholicos grade that we have no evidence that Catholicos was even a Catholicos, and because their names are similar, it's all in Armenian, so they consider themselves separate, Albanian, but they still write in Armenian, but they don't call themselves Armenian ethnically. They call themselves Udi. So it is much more, modern nationalisms are much more modern creations. So we have to take it into account while we are talking about history and historiography. Therefore we have to how do these neo-structuralists say, deconstruct the historiography.
Yeah, it's interesting. My mother actually tests very close to Udi samples, like the third thing. I also test close, not as close. So I guess most Eastern Armenians would test somewhat close to those samples. Javid, do we have some fuel in the tank for some questions from the audience that are not here? Okay. Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a question, if possible. Yeah. Actually, I was trying to find like the news where this was mentioned, but I couldn't. But I'm sure that when I bring it up, you will know what I'm talking about. I remember like 1 or 2 years ago, there was this news about like the Udi church leaders meeting with like the Russian Orthodox Church or something like this. Like they wanted to independize the Udi church from Armenian, like very complicated, but I don't know how it actually is. But the question is, so this was obviously one of the narrative battles against Armenian and Karabakh Armenians and their legitimacy, etc. But now, after the military intervention and there are no currently narrative battles they're not as relevant as before. Do you know what happened with this? Maybe you can first explain in your words what was happening, because of course people will listen to this and they don't know what I'm talking about. And then what happened to this? Is it still going on? Does it still make sense to continue with this?
Well, at first they wanted to establish their own churches. They sent some students to seminaries, I guess one in Poland and one in Turkey from these Assyrian churches. They had some progress with the Assyrian church, but it didn't turn out well, because you need communion with other sister churches, no? So they did not manage to get this communion. So nowadays, there is no, like, after the death of the Archbishop of the Russian Church in Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan currently, I don't know if it is political deliberate thing, or they just don't have time to choose new archbishop, but currently Russian Orthodox community of Azerbaijan has no archbishop. There is only one guy that is replacing him, and he's born in Azerbaijan, in Baku. He's a Russian, Alexei Nikoronov, I think, and he wrote his thesis on Caucasian Albania, and well, he regularly goes to Niche, to Udis, to baptize them, makes these services in Russian language, gives them Bibles in Russian language, and because, like, Udis, despite that they have an Udi Bible, they only know one prayer, and that is our Lord and our Father in heaven, and that's only it. So the knowledge of religion actually is on cultural level among Udis. They are as much as Christian as most of Azerbaijanis are Muslim. So it is mostly just a way of life for them, just some identification. They are not precisely doing these Christian observations like Lent or others, I don't know. So Russian Church is trying to evangelize them in their own opinion. Well, so this is the current situation right now. Azerbaijani government doesn't do anything right now. They would like them to be like an NGO, not religious community, like in an institutional sense. There is not even like a possibility for them, I think, for them to become a religious, to establish this Albanian Azerbaijani church. I don't think that there is a possibility right now, because there is no seminaries in Azerbaijan, there is no Christian establishments. We don't even know what church means. So yeah, there is this. And I think that it has stopped, that progress has stopped. They are becoming Russified.
Thank you. We have some questions from the audience that couldn't be here. Some of them prefer not to use their names if they're not here. So one of them is on the question of this rhetoric on Western Azerbaijan. So at the moment, what's the state of mind of Azerbaijani population now that Artsakh, Karabakh is fully back on Azerbaijan's control? How do they see the rhetoric of Western Azerbaijan or West Azerbaijan and the potential future aggressions it implies?
Okay, so there is a different opinion among simple folk and among the people online. If you look into what people online write, they want to go back to Armenia so much, they want to go back to Zangezur so much, but when it comes to the local people, the Karabakh was a matter of identity, a matter of honor for them. So sending your kids to die or kill in Karabakh was not a big dilemma for them. But seeing their kids, possibility of their kids dying somewhere in Armenia, in mountains of Armenia, or like next to Sevan, because of this localism that I've just mentioned, is very, it's not something they run to. It's not something they want, unless they are from Armenia themselves. Those people who have been deported during the Soviet times from Armenia to Azerbaijan or during the 88, yeah, they have this nostalgia. And even the most local organization of them, Cavid Ağa Azerbaijan icması, which now gets state support. Back then, their leader was complaining that these politicians, be it government or the opposition, they always remember us refugees or like people from Armenia only thanks to political concerns. They want to get the votes, to play the nationalism card. They were always complaining about this. Even their leader now, who is now member of the governing party, but back then he was an independent, always giving these interviews that government is using us, opposition is using us, nobody cares about us. And I think that back then it was rather true explanation of things. Current government only stepped up this game because of this whole. They don't want, to be honest, Armenians back in Azerbaijan. I don't believe that. So I think that is the reason they are pushing this narrative that if there are no Azerbaijanis in Armenia, there's not going to be Armenians in Azerbaijan. So they don't think that Armenia is ever going to agree to this. Armenia is never going to agree to this. So it is like justification for them. See, Armenia doesn't want, so we don't want Armenians either. I think that's the explanation for them. That's why they are pushing this agenda. But I don't believe that realistically any of them thinks of going back to Armenia. Because they always, most of them have like third generation or fourth generation right now in Azerbaijan living. They haven't even seen these lands, and they have this understanding of they can't think of themselves going to some village in Joyta and living just next to Armenians on the other side. These things were not. Karabakh people didn't think about it either. They didn't believe it either, except for the ones who lived back in the day with Armenians. But new generation didn't believe that possibility. They didn't want this. They didn't want to live with Armenians for real. So I don't think that those people want it either. If you are going to take Azerbaijanis back to Armenia, they believe that it should be somewhere without Armenians. So I think that's the reason government pushes this. And I don't believe there's sincerity on resettling Azerbaijanis back to Armenia.
Okay, thank you. I will ask one more from what we have from the audience that's not here, and then maybe I can open the floor to anyone else who has a question here. So one other question is, what concrete simple elements could we try to spread among our respective societies as a soft power bridge of peace? What could be the impact through, for example, arts, sports, environmental issues, you name it? So soft power.
Well, soft power, like, it's very hard. Well, if I was to talk optimistically, I would have counted many things, but I have to be a realist. Azerbaijan is an authoritarian state. These kinds of initiatives only can happen through the government, only through the state, because government wants to be the deciding factor. They want to select which Armenians I'm going to talk to. They want to select which Armenians are going to come to Baku and visit. There is a huge state ages, and even when you are working with minorities, even you can't even work with minorities by yourself. There's always some state liaison, some government liaison between yourself and the local municipality, because you have to refer someone in the government and say that, oh, I am in Khanalik, I want to work with you. And they are not going to say, hey, okay, come and work with us. They said, okay, give you the order, who give you the allowance? It's always has to be someone in the state. So sorry for saying that, sorry for breaking your hopes, but unless Azerbaijan becomes much more open and liberal and progressive, democratic, there's nothing become much do. It is always going to be fruitless. The government media, the government rules the media. They are always going to brand ourselves as traitors. They are always going to call us names. They will always, they have the power. So we could do only small impact, and it could only be among our friend circle. So we should not like target for big groups. And when it is your friend circle, I can't call it a soft power. We can only change our friend circle. We can only change our family. And I think that's it. I don't see any possibility right now for the term soft power to happen.
Thank you. So anyone else who's present here wants to ask a question? Anyone in the audience? Aram, please.
Yes, thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. So, thank you, Javid, for a very interesting conversation. You mentioned the authoritarianism that exists in Azerbaijan, and also said that a democracy would probably kind of improve the situation of like, and improve also the chances of reconciliation, I'm assuming. So I guess my question is, how much do you think the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan is dependent on one or both of the parties being in this liberal democracy and like being democratic? And how much has it suffered because of authoritarianism that existed in one country or the other? Because Armenia used to be authoritarian too.
Okay. Well, Azerbaijan wants victor's peace. Armenia and Azerbaijan does not want the same kind of peace. And it was the same before the war, but reversed. So we do not, the Azerbaijan and Armenia do not want the same kind of peace. Azerbaijan wants a victor's peace, that like First World War kind of peace, that Armenia pays reparations, Armenia like changes constitution or removes some of, maybe destroys some of the statues in their country, I don't know, and maybe apologizes. The Azerbaijani government wants this kind of peace, a humiliating peace, and I see that way, that Armenia wants a kind of peace that you don't get exterminated. I think that what's this kind of differences between the countries and the regimes, and what democracy could help in that regard. I'm not saying that democracy would magically solve everything, but democracy and liberalism would mean the rule of law, and that rule of law would protect the freedom of speech. So it would mean that I won't fear anymore, or like my friends won't fear anymore talking to Armenians about some subject. They won't fear that they are going to be persecuted by random Twitter troll who happens to work for the state security service. It means that his freedom of speech will be defended by the government or law enforcement. he will be much more free and easy to talk, and other people, the society, will be much more open to hear them, because right now we all have internet. We are not on TV. We are not on like radio or anything. We are not on big pages on the social media of government. Like nobody, we only have each other. So this is what democracy could help in that regard. When it comes to Armenians, authoritarian period, I don't know, I've never lived in Armenia, of course. I've never been to Armenia, but the way I see from the media, at least, these were different kinds of authoritarianisms. And at least you managed to change governments or like presidents, despite them, they were very similar. In Azerbaijan, we never had, we can't even think about it. This possibility, we only look into Turkey and feel a little bit optimistic about the future. So I think there's this disparity between the state of politics and diplomacy between our countries, especially the people of mind of the people. In Azerbaijan, most of the Azerbaijanis are war weary. They think that Karabakh is back. Now we have to focus on going back to Karabakh because it is still full of mines, and some people, very nostalgic people, want to go back to their villages and their histories, their families' graves. This family grave cemetery thing is like this very sentimental, could be one of these defining traits of Azerbaijan, is that they are very protective of their cemeteries. You probably know this British Indian guy traveling Armenia, Avara nickname, Gurdeep, I think. He takes the photos of Azerbaijani cemeteries there and sends it to me. Despite all these problems, he wants to document this heritage. And when I publish them on my page, people are replying me, messaging me in tears, like, thanks to you, I saw my mom's grave after 30 years. Thanks to you, I saw my ancestor's grave. And they even offer me money to give to some Armenians in the village to like restore them or look after them. Like they are not ashamed of giving money to Armenians, just if it helps to secure their, like, save their heritage and cemetery. And there's this difference of people. Back then, before the war, people, Armenians and Azerbaijanis, used to hire people. Most of them were like Russians who would go to their former villages, take videos, and send them each other back in Armenia or Azerbaijan, doesn't matter. And they shared these videos with all their communities, like, look, that's the street I grew up. Look, that's the place you used to live. So they still have this idea of belonging. So but this idea of belonging is fading away. New generation don't have this. New generation has replaced this might mix rights idea that it has been ours. We are going to go back there. But when he says that we are going to go back, it doesn't mean that he used to be there. He says that we are going to go back to Khankandi because it was ours as Azerbaijanis. He doesn't feel connected to Khankandi per se. Sadly, this generation is dying out. So we have a very small time frame to force our governments to make this reconciliation. Sadly, I don't see this opportunity in Azerbaijan, but maybe in Armenia, you could do this, that let's go back to Baku or Sungayit and maybe make these field trips like organized by both governments who used to live there, see their old houses, grandma's houses. As I said, without government, it is very hard. And when it's going to be through government, we will need to make some concessions, maybe from our conscience as well. Like, okay, I'm going to be photographed with Aliyev, but yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Javid. Apparently, it looks like that will do with the questions. Javid, do you have any message, a few words of wisdom you want to share with our audience, with Armenians, Azerbaijanis?
Well, I do not have I do not consider myself wise, but I have this maybe an explaining to do. Some small note about myself. As I said, that I have this zeal of converts against nationalism. So when someone makes or something like a nationalist comment online, I might be, how do you say, agitated and could rush to label you. I'm trying to rein myself these days because I passed through these stages too, but I just ask for forgiveness beforehand if I had like misjudged you before. Yeah, that's it.
Diego, you want to say a few words before we end? All right then.
No,
Thank you everyone who were here and whoever submitted questions. We had a wonderful conversation with Javid Agha, a very interesting personality known in the South Caucasus. I'm sure we will continue talking in person, informal platforms, etc. And this meeting, this roundtable will be recorded and will be available on YouTube, most likely in a couple of hours. And in YouTube, actually, on YouTube, you will also find the recordings of our garden chats, which were Instagram interviews. We've been uploading those also there, so you can find those. But of course, do also follow us on Instagram for, to participate live in those interviews, in other content. We're on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, elsewhere. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. It looks like it's a good platform, this roundtable. The first two have been going very well, and we hope to do more of this. Please send us any recommendations you have of people you would like to see. And that's it. Cheers. Have a great day. Have a great night. Until next time.